Welcome back to Movie Guys Improvise, the MGI podcast. You were listening to the voices of
Chill with the Realms,
Jurassic Mark,
and Faerhad Targaryen. Last month's episode, the Halloween episode, because it was in October, we reviewed my all-time favorite movie, Love, Simon, and every single one of us here gave it very high reviews. If you haven't seen that movie, we all really recommend it. Check that movie out. Then check out our review of it, because we all had a really good time reviewing that. And today's episode, Chill with the Realms choice, Blue Hill Avenue. This movie really blew me away. I was not expecting this, hadn't even heard of this movie before Realms suggested it. Came out a while ago, 20 years ago actually, 2001. I don't want to say nothing else about it before we get into it. So Realms, tell us what this movie is and why you chose it. Go ahead.
The movie is essentially about a group of young kids who end up having a run-in with drugs, and they decide to work together and sell the product themselves. And essentially towards the end, they're working like most of the friends, they want to continue the drug game because it's all they know. And then the main character, he's in a struggle where he's really good at it, but he wants to get out of it.
I think you mentioned at the end of the Love, Simon episode that this was one of your favorite movies back in the day, and that's why you chose it, or was there a different reason why you chose it for today?
Yeah, I think it's a movie, I want to say that my dad was playing one day, and I ended up catching a little bit of it, and I really wanted to watch it. So we watched it together, and it was pretty impressive to me, like at that time. So it always stuck with me.
It was really fucking impressive to me too, man. I didn't know what to expect other than this was gonna be some crime drama movie, probably about I don't know, maybe from the looks of the movie poster about gangsters. That's what it is, but it's a damn good movie at that. Oh my god. Okay, so
yeah, absolutely.
The main character, the gentleman that you were saying, who's really good at it, who's like the brains of the operation, played by Payne. And I think this dude is a really good actor. I recognized him the most from a movie called Jason's Lyric. And that's actually, I think it might be the only other movie I've ever seen him in, but he's good. You know, I'm surprised. So movies like this, it's not the type of movie I would expect to be like a huge box office hit, like a modest box office hit. But it is the type of movie I would have expected to receive numerous awards. And it did get nominated and won some awards, but not nearly as much as, in my opinion, it deserved. Okay. Before I get into it, JM, you hadn't seen this movie either. I don't know if you even heard of it, but what were your initial first thoughts and impressions?
Oh, it's a very good crime thriller. And yeah, I was surprised that I hadn't heard of this movie because it's so well made and so well written. There were a lot of great lines, some amazing acting. But to give our listeners a sense of, I guess, the situation, if you look this movie up on Rotten Tomatoes, it doesn't have a critical tomato meter rating, like period. There's an audience score, but it says there are only like 2 critical reviews the website could find. So it looks like almost nobody in that world has really touched this movie, you know? And I found a headline from the Boston Globe calling it the best Boston movie no one's ever seen, which sounds like an exaggeration, but there's probably a bit of truth to that, you know?
Yeah. I definitely think there is a bit of truth to it. And I did a bit of the same thing as you did after I watched the movie, because I wanted to see, do the critics agree with me on something like this? And it doesn't seem like they do, because as you said, there's nothing from professionals on Rotten Tomato about it. And if you go to Metacritic, based on 4 reviews, it's got a 41. And I think that's low, okay? I disagree with the critics on this one. This is a really, really good movie, okay? So the movie starts off with them as teenagers, as Realms was explaining, and how it starts off with like a very typical, I guess, high school thing. Like they're just playing basketball. They're betting on a basketball game. And then the kids that they're playing don't come through with the bet because they lost. They start a fight instead. But it's like, dude, you lost. Pay the money that you owe. What argument do you have other than being punk ass bitches for not paying a lousy $20 for losing, you fucking sore losers? But in the midst
especially
of
when he had that thick ass stack of cash.
Was that cash? I thought that was like
Actually, no,
weed
that
or
was.
something.
Oh yeah, you're right. That was drugs. When I first saw it this time around, I thought it was cash.
Or his wallet or something. But
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But then the henchman guy, Benny's henchman, as we learned later, Benny's henchman just pulls it out of his pocket and gives it to him. He's like, "Oh, this is worth more than 20. You can smoke it, sniff it, or sell it, or whatever, or something like that." So the girl who runs over to the car, I don't know if she knew who that person was, but that was Martine, who does become a semi-important character a little bit later. But Benny, as we learned, is supposed to be some sort of kingpin in Boston. And the actor who plays him, I believe it is Clarence Williams III. I recognized him from a movie called American Gangster, starring Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. And while that movie also isn't perfect, that's one of my favorite movies as well. I think that's a really good movie, even though it's not historically accurate, it's just so well acted. But that's a story for another time. This movie, this general vibe and feeling and tone of this movie kind of reminds me of a TV show that I have spoken to y'all to about numerous times called The Wire, which still might be the best TV show I've ever seen. But the big difference, tone-wise, storytelling-wise, between The Wire and Blue Hill Avenue is that Blue Hill Avenue focuses pretty much only on the gangsters, I guess. I don't know what else to call them. And there are two police officer detective characters in this movie, but they never were really that important. They were mostly plot devices. They were like thorns in the sides of other characters, but they didn't really get development. The Wire, on the other hand, it has many different groups and settings and characters in the city of Baltimore that play a big role. So there are the street characters, there are the cop characters, there are the politician characters. And even the homebody characters. So a lot of different, I guess, groups that are very, very important in that show. But tone-wise, like storytelling-wise, besides the characters, it's kind of similar. And I hope y'all will one day have the chance to get to see The Wire. But getting back to Blue Hill Avenue, it starts off for almost half an hour of this movie is them as kids. The very beginning, the cold opening of the movie was like the very end of the movie, toward the end of the movie, actually, where there's this drug deal that goes wrong. Doesn't give us much context, just gives us an example of, what the tone, it sets the tone of the movie, basically, right? But then it goes into a half hour of a flashback sequence. And honestly speaking, I felt like the teenage character versions, like that storyline, that story thread, the introduction was so good. I feel like I would have enjoyed the movie seeing that storyline as well, just seeing how they became who they were as the adult actors. You know what I mean?
like Stephen King's It or something, like where you see the characters as teens and then you see them as adults.
Yeah. Like obviously most of the movie is them as adults, but what I'm saying is that because I found the storytelling of them as kids compelling enough, I would have probably enjoyed the movie if they had that as the whole movie itself. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's funny to me because probably my next movie pick is gonna have like part of the movie be about the kids and their journey, and then there's gonna be flash forwards to when they're adults, but it's gonna be mostly centered around when they're kids.
Okay. Realms likes coming of age stories.
I do.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, so do I. My favorite movie that we just reviewed was also a coming of age, coming out movie. So yeah, if you got a good story to tell, I will watch it. So
there you go.
All right. There's not much for me to say that I don't like about this movie. My favorite character might be Tristan's uncle, the barber at the barber shop. My favorite scene was actually during the teenage sequence where Tristan is going up to his uncle and saying that here's a little money, you gotta help pay rent. I gotta help you pay rent. And then he gives him this pep talk about like, I'm not stupid. I know where you got this fucking money from. And if you're gonna be doing this shit, make a plan to eventually get out of it. And I liked that. If there was no voice of reason in this movie, either from a character or from actions at all, I would have liked it a lot less. But it was there. And Tristan himself, he had heart. Okay, even though he became a murderer as a teenager, right? They killed those. I don't remember the name of the character he killed, but he killed him for beating up Ebone, right? Like Ebone, I guess, was on his way somewhere, and he got beat up, right?
Jim, Latham, I think the character's name was Latham. I think. But...
Latham, thank you.
Yeah.
So
he was selling on their block.
Yeah. And I remember the voiceover that Tristan was saying about how once you kill that first person, that's a line you cross and you can't go back from that. But every single person he ever killed after that, he only saw Lathan's face. He only remembered the face of the first person he ever killed after that, right? So it changed him doing that.
Yeah, that was a great line. Like there are so many great voiceovers in this movie. Like another one that stuck out to me was when he said, "Friends, sometimes I think that word's gonna kill me." You know, it's a really quotable film.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
He expands all that in another scene, in the hospital scene, where he says, "The loyalty to my friends and theirs to mine is both a blessing and a curse." He said something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess there's so much good to talk about this movie. I'm just gonna try to remember the things I didn't like and focus on that before we talk about like anything else, which is I would have liked to have seen a little more of his family, because there was this really one nice dinner scene, right? And his father mentioned how he's getting all A's, and we see how smart of a guy Tristan really is, right? It kind of reminded me of Malcolm X, the movie Malcolm X, because the example that that movie gave out was that because of the systemic racism and these minorities stuck in neighborhoods like this, they are forced into life of crime, right? But if they had the proper education, if they had the proper opportunities, they would be way more successful and be legitimate and stuff, which Tristan wanted for himself eventually, and his wife. They both wanted out, right? But if it wasn't so fucked up from the beginning, it wouldn't have to be like this in the first place. And that's the thing with Tristan. Like, he didn't come from a broken home, as his father later says in the hospital scene. He had a loving mother and father. He had a sister. He had a nice family life, but he chose a different path. And because I cared about that, because I cared about the family dynamic that they were putting in this movie, that's kind of one of the only complaints I have, is that and the treatment of the female characters in this movie. So up until the point where there was that fight that Tristan was having with Ebone and Simon and Money, and he just storms out of the bar that I guess that they own, and he's in his car, and Simon is trying to just talk some sense into him in his own way. There's this crackhead that just keeps trying to, I guess, beg for money or beg for crack, and at first they're like, get away, but then they see who it is, and Tristan's mind gets blown in the worst possible way, right? That's his sister. And honestly, guys, up until then, I completely forgot that he even had a baby sister. And they take her to the hospital. The doctor says that there's a hole in her sarcophagus, I guess, from all the crack smoking. I don't know what it does to you, but she's in the hospital. It's implied that she's going to be okay, but she needs extensive care. But we never really see his family again. I was happy to see his mother and father again, and him coming face to face with his father confronting him to say, "Why did you do it? Why did you become a drug dealer?" And he was at a loss of words because he's ashamed, and he just says, "It's because I'm good at it." But there was a voiceover there. I don't remember exactly what he said in the voiceover, but it was good. What he said there, it was a nice line. It was in that same scene that he says the thing about blessing and curse with his friends or whatever. But anyway, I'm trying not to rant too much, but what I'm trying to tell you guys is, I would have liked more of an epilogue at the end. He does say at the very end that, even though like after he walks out of Benny's office, he looks like he had a huge weight off his shoulders, that he's finally relieved that he's out of the game, but his parents are strangers to him. But it's not like his sister hated him, right? His sister was a crackhead. I would have liked to have seen him go back to the hospital and at least seen him say to his sister, "Look, I feel partially responsible for you becoming a crackhead because I did this to this neighborhood, and I will never let this happen to you again." I would have liked something like that. I would have also liked another scene with his uncle Barber to say, "I'm out of the game, and this shit is, I'm not going to be in this anymore," because that's what his uncle also wanted for him. It would have been fine for him to not see his mother and father again, because I would understand them not wanting to have anything to do with him. But all I'm saying is just sort of like an epilogue with him connecting with his family, because that's really what I would have liked to see. The movie was already quite long; it was over 2 hours long, but a little more, just a few minutes of that would have made that much more of a difference.
Yeah, although they didn't do that, like I was really happy they had those voiceovers in the background to kind of emphasize that he just wasn't like a heartless person who's just doing this regardless of how his family felt. Like he still had, regrets about it because it was still affecting his family. And they didn't really show him go back to the sister. but just his reaction to her in the hospital kind of, it gives you like a little bit of an inkling at least that he probably will go back to her, because he's, you know, as soon as they find out she's in the hospital, he's emotional about it, and then he nearly walks out of the game at that very moment. He's like, the price is too high. So they left little inklings, but I understand it definitely would be nice to actually see them dig more into it if they had more time without dragging the movie even longer.
Yeah, I mean that's the only thing, is that the runtime was already really long. And yeah, I'm sure he did. I'm sure the character did go back to visit his sister eventually, but I wanted to see that because I cared. After seeing his sister again in the state that she was in, I fucking cared and I wanted to see her get better. Them not doing that, you know, it's whatever. The movie was still really good, you know, regardless of all of that. And I guess the other complaint that I would have is the treatment of the female characters. Like Martine was an important character, right? But only for a few key scenes.
Right.
She yells at him when he comes home and tells him that she's pregnant, right? But we don't see any further development than that. We don't even really see a baby bump as time in the movie goes on, which makes me think, was she even telling the truth, or was she just saying that just because she was so desperate for him to quit being a gangster? I don't know. I do believe her, but I feel like there's an inkling of maybe she wasn't telling the truth.
It definitely, like, it definitely felt true. But the way she went about it with the whole, I wish you, like, I just asked just to see if you would quit for me. Like, that was crazy to me. Because as he was saying, like, she was playing games instead of just being straight up.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I liked how she was always, you know, standing by Tristan and always being a good wife to him whenever she needed him, and vice versa too. I was so worried, honestly, because he was getting angry at her. I was worried that he was gonna do something abusive, but he didn't. And respect to Tristan for being a better man, being a good husband, I guess. He's doing illegal stuff, he's a gangster and all that stuff, but besides all of that, I think he takes care of his wife, right?
At least how they illustrated it. In real life, he probably, if you're being verbally abusive, you probably end up being, you know, physically abusive at some point.
Yeah. Plus, you know, I'm not convinced that he ever actually did leave the life. You know, the movie seems to imply as much, but really, okay. How does he leave the film? He leaves the film basically by showing Benny, hey, I've got something on you. Leave me alone, or, you know, or else. But I think the rest of the film establishes that once you get knee deep in this stuff, too many people know you, too many people know of you. And I'm just wondering, maybe if the film had gone on a little longer, would we not see that perhaps his life isn't all that great after the events of the film? Maybe somebody else has a score to settle, or maybe somebody else, you know, wants him to do a favor or tries to rob him. You know, I was kind of assuming that was the direction the film was going to go at the end. I thought this was going to be another movie about how you really can't escape this kind of life once you've jumped into it. And it didn't seem to go there, but I almost wonder if there's maybe one or two more roadblocks for this character if they make a sequel.
It's one of those things, I feel like it's one of those things, like, they really just wanted to leave it off on a happy ending, but he
got a happy ending, but by that point I was just so suspicious of everything that was happening around this character. I'm like, it's a happy ending, I'm not sure I believe you, you know, when you're telling me this is a happy ending.
Me and my girl, we just actually got done watching another series on Netflix that I could potentially suggest in the future. It's called On My Block, and there's a character on there. He's knee deep in the game. He's running, you know, this gang called the Santos, and he ends up early on. His brother's trying to avoid being in it, and then he's pressuring him into being into it. He's like, "You can't run for it, you know, it's your family, whatever." And then towards the end, he ends up being the one that's out of it, and his brother's running the gang. And then as he's about to leave and, you know, make a new life for himself, what happens? His past catches up to him and he gets shot before he leaves. So the reality of the situation is, more times than not, once you're heavily in that shit, it's very difficult to get out in time to save yourself.
Yeah. I mean, hell, like, it obviously, you know, the context was different, but like even like Al Capone, when he got arrested, he was stabbed in prison. So, you know, this stuff sticks to you. I kind of, you know, at least that's my take on the situation. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about 90% of the time, so feel free to ignore me. But like,
No, that makes sense. That they even in like hero movies like
yeah,
Hancock, he
yeah,
got sent into jail, and then they're like, "Well, you put most of us in here," so it's like
yeah,
it's hard to escape your past.
there are repercussions. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up was the uncle. You know, we talked about him a little bit. There's a scene where he says, you know, crack is the problem. And he's very emphatic about that. This is when he's talking to adult Tristan. And I remember thinking at the time, is crack really the problem, or is crack a symptom of the problem? Because I might be wrong. I think the uncle, at least at the beginning of the movie, is the only person who's trying to run a business completely above board. And the movie establishes he's like, he can barely make rent. He's in deep financial trouble. And the only characters who are doing well for themselves financially are the ones who are selling drugs or, you know, pimping out women. And I kind of got the impression that what the movie was saying is that these things aren't the problem. The problem is that so many people live in this society where they can't really afford to be legitimate business owners, at least in this particular film.
right. So
Yeah.
like, crack is a big problem within the neighborhood, but the problem runs deeper.
That's kind of what I took from that one scene. Because, yeah, you know, the uncle's very righteously indignant, but by the same token, he couldn't keep his business afloat in this neighborhood. He tried to do it the honest way, and he needed his nephew's help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think both of you guys have been making really good points, and there's a lot that I want to just want to speak on your thoughts a little bit. So, firstly, I don't know if I would call the ending happy. It's more of a bittersweet ending, honestly, because the main character survives, his family survives, but all of his friends are dead, and it's not exactly the best case scenario. So to me, it was more bittersweet than happy. And you also make a really good point, JM, about how we don't really know that he's fully out. We don't really see him. We don't see his next move, really, about him fully stepping off of the game. But the thing is, that one scene where he's spazzing out in his car because he's so angry that all his friends are dead, he's stopped and he's spazzing out in his car, and another car pulls up. We don't know who that character is, but the character's words were, "Dude, can you like move on? You're blocking the road." And he's like, "Oh yeah, sorry." And he's saying that all polite and stuff. And then that character turns around and it's some guy we've never seen before.
Yeah.
And that just got me thinking, and Tristan even says this in a voiceover, that like, yeah, he's moving on. Like he is actually moving on. And now the problem is still there. You were just talking about how the real problem is not drugs flooding up the streets, junkies and all that, but it's just how fucked up the neighborhood is, that like people have to resort to that to make more money. And the cycle continues. Tristan is leaving, but someone else is taking his place. That was an indication to me that like, yes, he did talk about like investments, like early on, like remember when the car was bugged, they didn't know it at the time, but the car was bugged and Tristan was talking about like planning and stuff. That scene really showed how intelligent he was. And I thought that's where the movie was going. I thought the movie was going to be like an all-out battle between him and his boys versus Benny. And I thought that's where the movie was going to go. It didn't go that way, which is fine. But back then, in that scene in the car, he was talking about like investments and stuff. And Simon was saying he has no savings. He just spends all his money. But Tristan was smart enough to know you have to save. And with the money he's saving, he's going to invest and stuff. I don't even understand investments, but investing is another way to make money. And that's why, to me, it's like, you know, he would have a plan once he steps out of the game, because that's what he wanted. That's what I think. If this movie is trying to be hyper realistic, which The Wire is, I would argue that The Wire is a very hyper realistic TV show. If this movie isn't exactly aiming for that, because it's still fictional, it's still fake. I don't know if it's based on any true story out there, but if it were trying to aim for realism, then yeah, then what you're saying is totally accurate about Tristan, in that like he's never going to get out of the game. But all I was trying to say was that that ending, that one scene indicated to me that he does want out for better or worse for his family, because his wife is going to be pregnant from that point forward, and you know how this is affecting his other family, his sister. He did truly want out. So that's why, like, I respectfully disagree with you in that I think we can have faith that Tristan, this fictional character, would be totally stepping away from his life of crime.
Oh yeah, I think there's no doubt that he wanted out of the game. I don't think that would be the issue so much as the game trying to pull him back in. Like, that's what I was trying to say earlier. Like I thought what the movie was going for was a message along the lines of, if you're in it too deep, you're in it too deep. You can try to get out, but like old contacts or people with scores to settle might try to like drag you back in. That's how I thought the movie was going to end. That's not how it ended. And honestly, no, the ending worked. I liked that final shot. It wasn't what I expected, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's all I was saying.
Right, you're right. I mean, I guess it was open-ended enough. I mean, his biggest enemy is Benny, right? So I guess the movie was
Benny's still alive, yeah.
Exactly. So
yeah.
I suppose that the ending was open-ended enough where you could argue Benny will hire someone, pay them a boatload of money to kill Tristan out of spite, just out of spite, because he has leverage. But I could see him just being I could see Benny being so pissed off that he just goes and does it anyway. So,
bottom line is, he has enough on Benny to secure his safety for a period of time, but it's never a guarantee.
True. I mean, nothing in life is a guarantee, but you're right. You're absolutely right about that. So in this case, in this very specific scenario, yeah.
Especially being that he wants to stay in the neighborhood. Like if he left and went somewhere far away, his chances would be a lot better.
Well, I would think because Tristan is so intelligent, he would know never to let his guard down. So he would always think of a way to, protect his family in any specific way. So
but sucks having to live your life looking over your shoulder all the time.
True. Yeah, living in a life of fear, right? So as far as the bug in the car goes, only for a little while, I was thinking maybe it was Tristan himself who planted the bug, but for most of the time, I was actually thinking it was Money. But then we see that it wasn't Money, even though Money did try to make a deal with the cops, and it wasn't Simon, and it wasn't E-Bone. And then at the very end, Money accidentally kills E-Bone, right? Or shoots him, and then he bleeds to death.
E-Bone shot Money.
Oh, wait. E-Bone is okay. I got the two twisted then. My bad.
No, you good.
Okay. Well, I liked Money then. I liked Money, and that happened. The worst, I guess the worst thing about that scene, absolute worst part, was when the cops show up and then the cops shoot Nicole. I don't remember the name of. Was that her name? Or I don't remember her name.
I could find out.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Like she also seemed pretty ahead of the curve too. Like remember the bar scene where those other two drug dealers who are dealing coke are looking for Tristan and his homies, and she kind of shuts them down for a little bit. They were about to, I guess, shake things up in there, but she shut them down. So she seemed quite intelligent as well. But
yeah, and those guys totally underestimated her because I got the impression that they thought the guy behind the bar was like the head of the operation or the man they needed to talk to. And it was really, no, this woman just sitting off the side of the bar, minding her own business, like she's the real power there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have some of the cast members popped up, but she wasn't listed on like the Google search page.
No worries, mate. Were you gonna say something else?
Yeah. I was just gonna add on to the fact that she was the one to talk to. Like she was in there like telling the guy to make another shot for them and shit.
Yeah. So she seemed like a compelling character too, but she just gets shot by these dirty cops. At this point, they're dirty cops, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's it. That was the end of it there too. So I don't know. I felt like because they were giving her some development, they could have given her something better than that. And that was my other complaint, basically, is the treatment of the female characters. Tristan's sister, Tristan's wife, and then this character. Doing something a little bit more with them, I would have liked. But the funeral scene got me, like, I was pretty sad. I liked Simon a lot, and it was sad to see how he went out and his mother being so emotional. and
Yeah.
being killed by your own father. That twist about Twinkie being his father and Twisty being the one to kill. And he has the nerve to say, "Forgive me, son," to his son's dead body. He's like dying, man. He's not going to hear you. Or maybe he did because he had enough breaths to like write TW.
Yeah.
That was gangster that he did that as the last thing he did, right?
That's quick thinking while you're dying.
Yeah.
Exactly. I guess between the four of them, I trusted Ebone the least because he was always giving Tristan an attitude. Right in the car where he was like, you're favoring pussy over your homies, or that bitch, you just because you married some bitch. And
hostile motherfucker.
Yeah. I fully expected Tristan to go ham on his ass, but the better of him got the good of him, and he decided to just get out of the car and walk instead. But I wanted him to like punch Ebone for talking about Martine like that. Like, I didn't like that he was putting up with it, honestly. But that is what it is. We also, besides the beginning where we saw, I thought it was Ebone, but I guess it was Money getting beat up by Lathan and his grandma.
No, that was Ebone.
That was Ebone. Okay, so Ebone getting beat up, and his grandma taking care of him. That was the last we ever really saw of any of the other main characters' families. I mean, there was the reveal of Simon's father being Twinkie. Besides that, we don't really get any development on any of the other characters' families.
We didn't even see Simon's mother until she told us the Twinkie was.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, good point.
And I understand that movies cannot always, develop the families of every single main character, but
right.
because they were kind of showing how important family kind of was to Tristan, I was wondering if you would get to see a little bit more of the other characters, and it was important sometimes. Again, with the reveal with Simon, that twist and everything, but so. I was pleasantly surprised to see that they stayed in school. There was another movie that this kind of reminded me of called Juice, which was a movie with Tupac, starring Tupac and Omar Epps. Yeah, Rounds. Okay, so, but in that movie, the characters skipped school all the time. They didn't really do that in this movie. It looks like they actually stayed in school and they graduated, I think, even though they didn't, do anything good after that, but at least they didn't skip school or whatever. So
I mean, it made sense to stay in there because they were making money in there as well.
True.
Yeah,
True that.
Teachers.
Yeah, they had incentive to stay because of making money. Cool. Whatever.
Probably didn't have to study too hard since they were providing the teachers.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're probably right about that.
Grading you on the 420 curve.
Class with study hall.
But I think that pretty much wraps up my thoughts about it. I guess as far as final statements goes, like closing statements before going into ratings. Yeah, I thought this was a fantastic crime drama thriller. It's underrated. I think the movie itself and the actors deserved at least some more nominations. Really not that many. I'm just looking on Wikipedia. It was nominated for the Best U.S. Film in 2001 by the Acapulco Black Film Festival. It won that. Okay, that's cool. So it was nominated as Best Independent Film at the 2002 Black Reel Awards. It won. Alan Payne, who played Tristan, won as Best Independent Actor. He deserved that. He deserved more than that, but he definitely deserved that. And then at the 2001 Urban World Film Festival, it won both Best Director, Craig Ross Jr., and Best Human on Earth, Dylan Tafari Bennett, who did that character play? I don't even, that award doesn't really make sense to me, but cool. I think it deserved more. The Academy Awards are kind of problematic, arguably, but they're the most high profile that you can get with awards with movies, right? And I feel like this movie kind of deserved that. Some, at least, but it didn't. So
kind of makes me wonder what other movies were out at the exact year that made it difficult for this one to win.
True. Exactly. Yeah. And I've talked about The Wire a few times with you guys. And again, the Metacritic score for The Wire is pretty high, but it didn't really receive the award recognition that I think that show also deserved. And this movie is way less people have probably even heard of Blue Hill Avenue than The Wire, but I'm just saying it deserves to be heard, in my opinion. Like I would, again, I guess going into closing statements, I would definitely watch this movie again, but let's just do away with closing statements now. Is there anything else that y'all two want to say before we go into ratings?
This is definitely better than some other movies that did get Oscar buzz. I can tell you that right now. Like this is I mean, Crash is the one that everybody dunks on, but like this was also, but like I didn't think Bohemian Rhapsody was all that good, and I think it got like an Oscar for editing, but like this is better than a lot of movies that have like done things at the Academy Awards. So yeah, definitely check this out.
Agreed.
I would say I love the movie because it put me on to Alan Payne. Like I love him as an actor, and I wish I saw him in more roles. I think this is the first one I've seen him in. I think after that, I saw him on Fresh Prince. He made an appearance. It was when Will was on the basketball team, and then they had like the opposing team. They had another black guy on the opposing team, and then he was like, "Yeah," he's like, "Your worst nightmare is that I'm a homeboy just like you, so I can ball."
Oh my god. Okay, I did not know Alan Payne was in an episode of Fresh Prince, but now I gotta see that episode.
Yeah.
And then I know he was on this one show they had on the CW called The House of Payne, which was a pretty funny sitcom. And they came back recently with the show returned with the cast members, like the kids were older and everything. But the only thing I didn't like is fucking E-Bone's character, because the whole movie he's pressing Tristan about, oh, you trying to leave us, you trying to sell out, you probably the one who set the wire, and then he ends up being the one to fuck everybody over in the end. And he also was influenced to do it because of the girl that he just slept with. Meanwhile, he was getting on Tristan like, oh, you trying to get out because of some bitch, blah 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 blah, all that shit. So I dislike E-Bone for that shit, and he shot money.
Yeah.
You got to watch out for the ringleader. A lot of the time, oftentimes, the person who's complaining the most is the person with the most to hide. So, yeah.
True.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, he's kind of a hypocrite for complaining to Tristan about being loyal to his wife, and then he starts to make decisions based on the relationship he's in. As far as the House of Payne thing goes, was it a coincidence that Alan Payne has the same last name as being on that show, or was it because?
I gotta look at the rest of the cast last name, because when I just pulled up the cast members, I didn't know his name. I just always recognized his face. So when I seen Payne, I was like, oh shit, that makes sense. He's in it. But I don't know if the other members of the cast also had the same last name.
Gotcha.
But also, I think the show could be maybe written by him, or he could have like a big hand in it.
And it looks like the other actors have names like Davis and Shaw. So yeah, he looks like the only Payne on the cast list. Maybe it was a coincidence. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just curious anyway. But Realms, this being your movie choice, you go ahead first with the rating, man.
For me, I'm gonna give it a strong 8. Although, like I don't know, watching it again, for me, I felt like, I don't know, the acting for it was kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Like, I don't want to say dry. It wasn't dry, but it was like, I don't know, kind of like bland-ish a little bit. But it was like consistent. I don't know how to explain what I'm really trying to say. Like, I don't want to say it's like a bad thing, but like, I feel like some of the acting, like, it didn't pop like the way that I would kind of picture people would deliver it. Yeah. But that's just after like many times of watching it. But aside from that, I love it. I love the storyline. I love the gems within it. So I'm gonna stick with a strong 8 for it.
Gotcha. Yeah, 8 is a good score for sure. And I think I understand what you mean about the acting. I was thinking about that early on. I think it was kind of the direction, because I felt like the scene where the 4 of them show up to Lathan's house to kill him, and they do it, there just seems to be a lack of urgency in that scene, even though that was a heavy scene, right?
Maybe it's not so much the acting, maybe it's more like the tone.
Yes. I think that's what it is. I think it's probably what it was, honestly. But yeah, with that being said, for me, I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10. I think this is really, really good, underrated. Like I said, the biggest problems I had with it were the treatment of the female characters and not enough of an epilogue. It ends and that's it. But That's pretty much all there is for it. I like crime dramas. This was also a thriller, and I would definitely watch this again. Like if people are discussing, oh, what's a movie we could watch, and this comes up, I'd be like, yeah, I'd be down to see that. So definitely highly recommended by me as well. So like I said, Rams, you know how to pick them. Next time it's your choice, and it's a movie you pick that I haven't heard of. I'm gonna be hyped. From here on out.
He's setting a high bar.
I'll take it.
Yeah, well, I was actually going to give it an 8 out of 10 as well. I think it's, as I've said, very well acted, very well written. Also, we didn't really talk about this during the podcast, but I like the look of the movie. This was clearly a movie from the early 2000s before they used color grading on everything. If you watch a modern movie, it almost looks like it's got this grayish tint to it, whereas this had more of that harsh, realistic lighting that we were used to seeing back then. So that's something else I appreciated. Just one of many things the movie got right. I think it might have been a little stronger if we had spent more time with Tristan's family, but I really liked what we got all the same.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and I also I didn't think about that either, but I agree with you there too. I think part of that might be attributed to the fact that it was a little lower budget film, because 2001, that was also the year of like Harry Potter and
the first Lord of the Rings movie, yeah,
and Lord of the Rings, yeah. So I think part of it is the budget, but still, I didn't mind it. I think it did really add to how grounded they were trying to go for. I mean, the tone is a different story, but
it looked realistic. Like today, most of the major studio tentpole movies they're not shot in a way that imitates real life. There's always this sort of distorted coloration to them. And I like that this movie looked more real and lived in by comparison. Yeah.
Looks less like a movie and more like somebody's actually standing there and the shit is happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
That worked. Yeah. That worked in the movie's favor. So
yeah.
You were up, JM.
Okay, so you guys both have Netflix?
Yes.
Okay, so Realms, you've inspired me. I'm gonna let our powers combine because this is an anime. It is a Godzilla anime. So we're both gonna contribute something. It's called, there we go. It's called Godzilla Singular Point. It's on Netflix. And this is going to be a dry watch for me because it came out this year. I haven't actually gotten to see it because, I moved, I picked up a new job, a lot of things have happened. But let's go with the first 3 episodes. They're like 25 minutes each. And I'd be really curious to see what they do with this because the trailer looks pretty interesting. So there we go.
All right. It's gonna be the first bit of anime I watched in a little bit. I take a long break.
Wow.
Well, hey, we're gonna come roaring back, I guess, literally to anime. But yeah.
I did not even know there was a Godzilla anime on Netflix. But hey,
there are actually like multiples at this point, but we'll get into that for that episode. But but this one's specifically Godzilla Singular Point. So yep.
Sounds good to me. That's technically going to be the Christmas episode because it'll be recorded in December.
Yeah.
And it'll be the season finale of this season of this podcast. So
there we go. Well, my other option would have been to make you guys watch Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. But I think this is gonna go over a little better.
Probably. What?
It's this like ridiculous like B movie from the 60s. But I think this will go over a little better. But yeah. All right.
That concludes this episode of MGI. You are listening to the voices of
Chill with Realms,
Jurassic Mark,
and Faerhad Targaryen. Thank you all for those of you who have tuned in, and catch us again next month.
Handle business.
Sorry, that's my bad monster roar. I didn't know what to say. Okay.